Unpopular opinion, I had more fun reading Eragon than I did reading Harry Potter. The elitists can come after me. What's up, people? It's Epictalez back again, and today I'm going to be reviewing the top 5 books for new fantasy readers. Before I get into it, I would like you to like, comment, subscribe, put on the bell notification so that anytime I release my videos, you'll get to see it right away. For this list, I wanted to prioritize certain aspects that I feel like could hook you into the fantasy genre. First aspect is the book has to be exciting, so it has to have a good pace, and the book has to be fun to read. Number 2, the book has to be easy to read. If you're a beginner at fantasy, at the very least, like, it should be easy for you to read. 3, fantasy is a very big genre, and there are many sub fantasies. So each of the books is a different kind of book. So let's do it. Number 5, Breach of Peace. The scene at the front door was set into Fleet's mind. A child hanging by the chain from the second-story window, his swollen, bloody face confronting her as she approached the manor. Protocol was to leave the location of the crime untainted for as long as possible. Fleet had nonetheless ordered a beat cop to remove the horrid sight. The boy, no older than 10, deserved his dignity, but the chain was thick and the officer was still sawing away. I already reviewed Breach of Peace up there. You can check it out. I highlighted what I liked about it, and I highlighted what I thought the writer could improve on. This was his debut novel, and he prioritized making it easy to read. That is one of the reasons why Breach of Peace is a good book to start with. Breach of Peace is multifaceted. It has crime, it has mystery, it has a Sherlock Holmes type of vibe thing going. Fantasy is just an element that adds to the story. This was his debut novel. The pace of the book is really good. From the first sentence, no kidding, from the first sentence to the last sentence of the book, you're like, what is going on? In a good way. Number 4, Eragon. Keep in mind, Eragon, that no one thinks himself a villain, and few make decisions they think are wrong. A person may dislike his choice, but he will stand by it because even in the worst circumstances, he believes that it was the best option available to him at the time. Now, I know the elite veteran fantasy readers might disagree with me. I don't know why I imagine them in a dark room sipping green tea and just like shitting on Eragon. But Eragon is a good book to read if you're just getting into fantasy. Eragon has a special place in my heart because it found me all the way in Nigeria. It was one of the books that really defined what fantasy was. The problem people have with Eragon is that it's derivative of older books, but the writer was 17 when he wrote it, and I think he did a brilliant job putting everything together. Eragon was one of the first fantasy books I read, and at the time the concept of fantasy wasn't really a thing in my head, but after I read Eragon, I was like, whatever that is, I want more of it. And that's why Eragon is on my list. Eragon has all the classic fantasy tropes done in generic fashion, but it's a fun book to read, and the books progressively get better. I enjoyed reading Eragon, and if the Eragon affects you the same way it affected me when I first read it, then you're off to a great start. Unpopular opinion, I had more fun reading Eragon than I did reading Harry Potter. The elitists can come after me. Number 3, War of the Spider Queen. War of the Spider Queen is a brilliant book.
I don't care. Burn me with your magic. Stick a dagger in me. Break my neck with those long, clever fingers.
Interesting suggestions all, but I just assumed that Neem didn't bill me for your demise. If we can make it look as if your heart just stopped of its own accord, sometime after I took my leave, I'll have a chance. He cast about, noticed the thick, fluffy pillow on the bed, picked it up and experimentally gripped it at both ends. It felt good in its hands. This ought to work. I love it. It's a series in the Forgotten Realms world. Any of the series in the Forgotten Realms world would be a good fantasy series to start with. I chose War of the Spider Queen specifically because it is just dark and twisted enough to make it on my list. At the time I read Eragon, I was already tired of all the classic fantasy tropes. When I read War of the Spider Queen, I was like, what? The book is just a fun book to read. The characters are really good. War of the Spider Queen is one of the books that does plot-driven stories well enough that I enjoyed. The characters are very, very memorable. It's a great introduction into fantasy because the Forgotten Realms world has a little bit of everything. War of the Spider Queen is a book I would highly recommend. It's one of the books that helped me understand theme and tone of books very well because it was written by 8 different writers and all of them had to be consistent with the same tone, and it was also one of the books that made me feel like I could be a writer. I've read it multiple times because it's just that good. And yeah, even now that I'm reading more advanced books, War of the Spider Queen is still like a book I will read every now and then just because it's so much fun and I feel so much nostalgia reading it. It's a good book to start your fantasy journey on. Number 2, The Traveler's Gate. 2 children, a boy and a girl, cowered against the wall, holding a flickering lantern between them. The splotches of red he had seen was the girl's skirt and the boy's jacket. Not blood, he was relieved to see. A skeletal monstrosity loomed over them, something like a praying mantis but covered in rock-plated armor. Now, The Traveler's Gate is good for several reasons. One of them is that it doesn't have any excess. There is nothing excessive about Traveler's Gate. The pace of The Traveler's Gate is kind of similar to the pace of Breach of Peace. It's constantly rising and it is a fun book to read. This is just my opinion again, but when it comes to writing exciting fight scenes, Will White is comparable to Joe Abercrombie. I feel like as a whole, Joe Abercrombie is a better writer, but when it comes to fighting scenes that are exciting and are memorable and hyped up, Will White is like right up there with Joe Abercrombie. The Traveler's Gate has all the classic fantasy tropes, but there's a twist to all of them. For instance, there's a princess, but she's not quite a damsel in distress. Generic main character, but then it's like his self-righteousness is used to mock him like at several points during the book. I haven't read Mistborn yet, and a lot of people have said that Mistborn has the best magic system, but The Traveler's Gate has the best magic system I have read ever. It's just easy to understand. It makes sense. It's not oversimplistic. It's not overly complex. When a character uses magic, you understand what is going on. Maybe I'll talk about the magic system in another video. And number 1, the almighty Lord of the Rings. Come not between the Nazgul and his prey. He will slay thee in thy turn. He will bear thee away from the houses of lamentation, beyond all darkness, where thy flesh will be devoured and thy shriveled mind be left naked to the lidless eye. A sword rang as it was drawn.
Say what you will, but I will hinder it if I may.
Hinder me? No living man may hinder me. Lord of the Rings. A lot of fantasy readers read fantasy because they are still trying to fill the void left after they finish reading Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is everything good about fantasy. The fantasy genre is what it is today because of Lord of the Rings. Now, I broke my rule here when I said that the books on this list are all going to be easy to read. Lord of the Rings might take a while to get used to the style of writing, but once you get used to it, you're transported to a world with amazing characters, arguably the best world building in fantasy history, crazy, intense, and wholesome scenes. Lord of the Rings is just epic. It's everything good about fantasy, and it's a book that I can't recommend highly enough. You can read Lord of the Rings and you like it, then like you're off to a great start. And I don't want to hear,
oh, I've watched the movies and so I don't need to read the book.
No, that is like saying I have driven a Honda Accord, I don't need to drive a Bugatti Veyron. Like it's the movie and you need to read the book. Come on, the book is something else, trust me. So funny enough, right? A majority of the books I mentioned were debut novels. Breach of Peace is a debut novel. Traveler's Gate, debut novel. Eragon is a debut novel. I feel like there's something to someone that is just beginning their journey as a fantasy writer. It's their intentions are still pure. The emotions they want to invoke in their readers are the emotions that they felt as well reading their favorite books. They are still heavily influenced by the great books they have read, and that kind of expresses itself in writing something that is coherent for someone new to read and enjoy. That is just like, it's an observation and a theory I just came up with, but three of my top 5 were debut novels. Let me know what you think about my list. Let me know if you're going to read any of the books I just mentioned. Let me know what you think about my opinion. If you don't know it now. I'm a writer. My latest story is in the description down below. Check it out. I want you to like, I want you to comment, I want you to subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Peace.